Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. A couple of weeks ago, Rebel Wolves had a presentation regarding Blood of the Dawnwalker. It's a new vampire game from a lot of the same people who made The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt so successful, and consequently, a ton of people, including myself, are very excited about it. One aspect of the game that was revealed that I was not excited about was the time limits. And I made a video with the screenshot, or rather thumbnail, saying time limits destroy games. Quite a few of you did not appreciate it, did not like that. Let me know. And consequently, a ton of you have been reaching out saying, hey, this interview has occurred, this information has been released. Regarding the time limits, you should really go back and update what you said. And I listened to the feedback, and I've also listened to some of the new information that they've released. And I think it is worth going back and having a more granular discussion about this topic, about this feature, and how I think it affects the game. Consequently, we're doing this video. Before we get into what the interviews have said, I want to expand some on my comments regarding believing time limits are usually a negative feature in game. There's something I should have added to that. It's not just having a time limit in general. Many of you noted that I have played multiple games that had time limits and highly recommended them, such as Pathfinder Kingmaker, Disco Elysium, and Metaphor Refantasio. There's a big difference, though, between those games and other games that have time limits, including what I felt regarding Blood of the Dawnwalker. And that's the fact that even though these games have time limits, you can do all of the content within that time limit, and it doesn't necessarily require replays in order for you to get it done. It's not difficult. All right, Disco Elysium, I did almost everything in my first run. Then the things that I did mess up is because of choices that I made. It doesn't have a time limit that essentially makes it impossible for you to complete all of the content. Same with Metaphor Refantasio. I finished all of the content, got all of the royal archetypes in my first run. The time limit did not stop me from doing that. I did have to replay Kingmaker, but that's because I didn't understand kingdom management, and I had to restart once I understood more of that system. Again, the time limit, while it's very intrusive, and I feel like if they ever redid that game, they would have to change it around, it doesn't stop you from being able to complete all of the content. It just makes it very uncomfortable to complete all of the content. There are other games where the time limit absolutely stops you from being able to see content. I do not like that. I do not like that at all. That's the way I felt playing Dead Rising. I've never played through, I've never done an entire playthrough of Dead Rising, and it's fun, absolutely, to pop in, beat up some zombies, and all that good stuff. But I could never get into those games because it always felt like I was missing out on content and failing quests for no reason other than time. I do not appreciate those types of experiences. And when I heard Rebel Wolves talk about the time limits, the first thing that popped in my mind is, okay, I've done this quest, and because I made a decision to do that, I'm going to miss out on doing this. It's going to cause me to lose. It's going to cause me to not be able to see content. I don't like that experience. And I don't think it's crazy to say that I don't like that experience. Some of you were mentioning other time limit related games such as Gothic. I can't speak on Gothic. I don't know if Gothic allowed you to see the vast majority of content even with the time limit. Maybe that'll be an experience I enjoy when the remake comes out and I try it. But usually if you force me not to be able to see things, it's an experience I don't appreciate. And because of that, one of the things that I really appreciated in the Drop Frames interview, which a lot of this information is going to come from, with Cohh Carnage, Ezekiel, and JP interviewing Des from Rebel Wolves, I really appreciated Cohh Carnage's candor when he asked about the time limit, because he came from the exact same perspective as me. He said, hey, I want to see everything. And it seems like the time limits are going to stop me from being able to do that. So don't try to say that I'm crazy. All right? Like, other people heard the same thing and they felt the exact same way. And so I really, really appreciated that even after the original answer regarding time limits was given, Carnage drilled down and said, hey, I need you to expand on this further. And I absolutely agree. This helps the conversation helps me to understand more what's happening with the time limits and makes me feel more comfortable. So let's go ahead and get into it. So once again, the Drop Frames interview was with two devs from the Rebel Wolves studio. One of them is Mateusz Tomaszkiewicz, who serves as the creative director, and the other one was Ariana Sarkowicz, who is the writer or a writer. I'm not sure if she's the lead writer or a writer for the game as well. And they spoke for about an hour talking in depth regarding the game. So the majority of this video is going to be regarding the time limits, but at the end, I'll also include some other tidbits that I thought was really interesting for the discussion. And of course, I'll leave a link down below in the description so you all can check out the video for yourself. So the first thing they want to make clear is that they're approaching time limits in a similar way to Fallout 1. I've never played Fallout 1 before. I started this series at 3, but my understanding is it has a time limit on the game where you have a certain amount of days to accomplish a task. But if you wanted to, and if you knew how to do it, you could walk from where you start all the way to the end and accomplish the task basically at the very beginning of the game. It would be very difficult for you, obviously, with no resources and no levels, but it is possible. And that's kind of the same way they're approaching Dawnwalker, in the sense that you have the task of saving your family, and you can spend the game collecting resources, collecting allies, and trying to figure out things to make it easier. Or you could decide that you want to just rush in and go ahead and accomplish the task yourself. As was mentioned before, time is a resource. So every time you complete a quest, you will be presented with an option to use some time in order to do that. Now, what they clarified in this video is quests will not fail if you are not aware of them. So when they talked about the system, the first thing I thought about is, hey, you're giving me the open world for the first time and I walk into town. I meet this person very quickly and she has a quest that she wants me to do, but it's going to require time in order for me to do it. And my thinking was 2 blocks away, there might be somebody else with another quest, and it's a very, very urgent one. And if I take this quest from this person, that means I'm going to lose out on this other quest. And so every single time I'm going to have to carefully consider, well, is this something that I should do? And they made it clear that that is not the case. This system is not meant to provide decision paralysis. It's not meant to be stressful. Quests will not fail if you are not aware of them. So they use the example of a burning building. They are like, so if you come upon a person and they're standing in front of a burning building and they need your help, yes, that is an urgent quest. You need to run in there right then, right there, if you want to assist with that person. But if you're in a totally different part of the game world and do another quest, it's not all of a sudden going to fail your quest to save that burning building. It doesn't come into play until you're actually aware of it. And they said very, very consistently, it will be clear when you're dealing with a quest that has some urgency around it, where it's going to fail if you don't take care of it right then and there. That's definitely something I appreciate. It's one of the issues that I have with Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 that I hope is better than the second one. They have these quests that have urgency attached to them, but I feel like the game does a poor job of communicating that, because it also communicates urgency on a bunch of quests that actually don't have time limits and you can submit them whenever you want. So it's kind of weird to figure out, okay, am I in a situation right now where I can run around and do side quests if I want to? Seems like Blood of the Dawnwalker is not going to have that problem, and the game will communicate to you in a very clear way when there's serious urgency regarding a particular situation. Rebel Wolves also added that sometimes it's best to let a quest play out naturally and not get involved, because that is a decision in and of itself, and this game really focuses on reactivity. So sometimes you'll get a result from just letting a quest play out that you would find equally enjoyable to getting involved. And maybe it might potentially weaken an enemy or bring about a situation that ends up being helpful for you. So I think that's going to be interesting to determine what are situations where you might want to say, you know what? No, it's better for me to stay out of this. And they mention over and over again that this is all really about maximizing freedom. They want to maximize the amount of freedom that the player has. So you can't completely ignore some of the storylines and content that is in the game. And it's not necessarily going to punish you for it in any real way. You have complete authority to decide what actually is important to your character. They also mentioned that the day-night cycle provides you with different options when it comes to completing quests. Sometimes it might be more advantageous to approach a quest during the day, whereas other times coming in at night might give you some avenues that otherwise would be unavailable to you. Very cool and interesting stuff all the way around. And then the last thing that they mentioned that I really appreciated and gives me a lot more confidence in this game and this system is that the time limit is not a replayability gimmick. Cohh asked directly, is this game being built from the ground up to be replayed multiple times because you're going to miss a bunch of content based on what stuff you decide to do? And the answer was no. The way that they're handling you missing content is similar to how it's handled in The Witcher, meaning that your choices would cause you to miss out on certain content. You wouldn't see certain scenes. You couldn't have relationships with certain people based on decisions that you have made, which I'm totally fine with. But it's not a situation where the time limit is all of a sudden meant to force you out of a bunch of different content and things that you could potentially do. Very happy to hear that. And they stressed that this is not about making the player feel cheated based on the decisions or things that they do. If it felt good to you in The Witcher, which it definitely did for me, then they stressed it'll feel good for you in Blood of the Dawnwalker as well. All of that sounds great. Sounds amazing. Again, gives me a lot more confidence regarding how time limits are going to be handled in this game. They stressed you will be able to see the majority of content. That's what I want. That's all I want. I do not appreciate games that essentially force you to miss things or make it extremely difficult for you not to miss things unless you're following a guide. This gives me a lot more confidence that they're handling time limits in a way that I can appreciate. So hopefully it also gives some information to many of you who are concerned about time limits and helps you feel more comfortable. Now, let's also move over to some of the general details regarding the game that I personally found interesting. This game will deal with very dark themes, but it's not a horror game. And that's actually something I appreciate. I'm not particularly entertained by being scared, to be honest with you. I never play horror games. I might end up playing a couple of them in October this year, streaming it on the channel. But otherwise, as far as my own personal enjoyment, I never play horror games. And I was a little bit concerned that they would go that route with this one, but it seems like that's not the case. Now, they already mentioned in the last presentation that in their world, vampires grow more teeth as they get more powerful. But they expanded a little bit on this and said that vampires cannot control where those teeth grow, and it can result in grotesque appearances. For example, there's a female vampire in the cinematic trailer who has teeth growing out of her head. And so they said there are all sorts of different ways this can manifest for different vampires. The teeth are retractable to some degree. The vampires all have different cultures, and this is very important to them, as their cultures help to shape their world views. All of the major vampires have different powers and radically different backgrounds. One is from Rome, another is from ancient Greece, and one hails from the Mongolian Empire. Rebel Wolves has been releasing character profiles for each of them, and when they are finished, I'll do a video walking through the entire roster. What we've seen thus far seems really cool. Players can decide if they side more with the vampires or feudal lords, which is very interesting to me because I'm curious to find out if accepting your role with the vampires and deciding to more so join them as opposed to fighting against them and rescuing your family is an option. That alone would definitely give this game more replay value. Speaking of which, they did talk about the endings to some degree, and they said they're working on multiple endings, but they want all of them to feel satisfying on some level. So it's not going to be like some games where there's a good ending and then there's a bad ending. Instead, they want to make it a situation where there's something positive or something entertaining to glean from just about all of the different endings that you could potentially get. That should be very exciting and interesting. Definitely looking forward to what they come up with. And then the last note that I found really interesting is Ezekiel asked the question, how does Ariana, the writer, get into the mind of a centuries-old vampire? Of course, none of us can live for hundreds of years, and so he found the concept of trying to write for someone who had been alive for that long fascinating. And she gave the answer that it's important not to bullshit the player. She said you don't want to go too deep and try to make it seem like you would know exactly what this type of person feels or experience, because obviously you don't. So instead, you provide some things that will spark the player and get them emotionally invested and allow them to think they know what the vampire thinks or believes, and that is what is going to make the character enthralling for you. I found that to be a fascinating answer. It was really cool the way she delivered it, and it makes me even more excited and interested to see what her writing is going to be like when the full game comes out. And that's it. That's my perspective, or updated perspective, regarding the time limits and some of the other information that has been announced regarding this game. Once again, super excited about it. I'm much more comfortable now with the time limits than I was during the first video. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts? Do you feel comfortable with the time limits now if you didn't before? Is there any particular content you would like to see regarding this game? I definitely plan to continue to track it until the full version is released. Hope all of you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.